Hello and welcome to Cayman Connection's Greener Futures virtual yard meeting. So glad you could join us today. We've got a really exciting session coming today. We know a lot more people joining us, and we will be talking about some fantastic initiatives that are happening in the Cayman Islands, but not just the Cayman Islands, but globally. So I'm really excited to have with us today Anik Jackman from the Cayman Islands National Trust. We have Catherine Childs from the Environmental Programs Manager. She's at the National Trust, but will also be representing Island Offsets today. We have James Elsmore, writer and entrepreneur from Island Innovation, who will talk to us about the fantastic things he's been doing on a global scale with many different islands. And Sangeeta Lourdes, who will be talking to us about her work with Green Horizons. So thank you so much all for joining. Our fabulous Rita is on board to help with questions and to let people in if possible. She's just stepping out for the moment, but will be joining us as well shortly. So I will tell you a little bit about Cayman Connection. We've got some new people joining us today from our membership and also from our speakers membership. So you may not know that much about Cayman Connection. We are a global network supporting Caymanians and associates and people who are interested in the Cayman Islands overseas. So we like our membership to understand what's happening in Cayman on various levels, either environmental, educational. We also provide a support network for Caymanians overseas. It's a fantastic way to come together, to share learnings, share experiences, network, and learn from new people about some fantastic things going on. So this quarter, we are honing in on environment and sustainability. So I'm really, really pleased to have our fantastic speakers here with us today. And I would like to start by introducing the National Trust. Anik Jackman will tell us a little bit about her program. We'll follow on from that with our Island Offsets representative, Catherine Childs, followed by James, followed by Sangeeta. So, Anik, lovely to have you here. Thank you for joining us. With a keen interest in preserving Cayman's unique environment and heritage, Ms. Jackman's prior experience encompasses advertising, marketing, strategic development, high-profile events in the Cayman Islands tourism sector, and also has been heavily involved in public speaking training through the Toastmasters organization, all of which are an asset to the National Trust for the Cayman Islands. Thank you for joining us, Anik. We look forward to hearing more.
Thank you, Kate. And I know for some people it's morning, like myself and Kathy, and for others of you, good evening. Nice to be able to connect with those of you in the UK. And thank you so much for this particular opportunity. We are really excited to be a part of this presentation. I do believe we may have one representative from the National Trust with me as well as Miss Kathy, but I wanted to just give a little bit of context about the National Trust and what we do. First of all, you can put as an emoticon, or you could put your hands up for those of you who are on screen. Have you ever heard about the National Trust, and are you even familiar with some of our programs? All right, I see 2, 3, 4. Okay. All right, so we have a few people who are aware of the National Trust, and I just want to add a little bit more to what you know, and for those of you who don't know, to open up a whole new world for you. And I want to have some fun with you all. So I'm going to tell you about my first week on the job, and I'm going to have fun because Kathy's here and she's our environment manager. And my first week on the job, I got a call from Kathy and she said to me, I need you to go and rescue a spider. And I thought she was kind of joking with me. I was like, a spider? But anyway, I had the opportunity to go to the District of West Bay and in Grand Cayman, for those of you obviously who are very familiar with Grand Cayman and West Bay District, and rescue a huntsman spider. So that was my first introduction to the job, learning about some of our insect species right here in the Cayman Islands. And when I talk about the National Trust, it is absolutely incredible the amount of work that a small team of 11 people do. And to give you just some quick off the bat statistics, we're responsible for over 24 sites across the 3 islands. And these sites are both built heritage sites, historic sites, and environmental sites. And some of you are familiar with them, or most of you, I hope, are familiar with at least one. So when you talk about Little Cayman, you're talking about the Booby Pond. If you're in Cayman Brac, the Brac Parrot Reserve and Sylvie's Reef. If you're in Grand Cayman, you're talking about the Mastic Trail. You're looking at our flagship property of Mission House and Nurse Leela's in West Bay, the old Savannah Schoolhouse. So we have an incredible mandate where we are protecting various reserves. We are protective of various historic homes, but then part and parcel of our responsibility for the protection and conservation of Cayman's built heritage and environment includes education. So we invest a lot of time trying to educate the Cayman community about all of the things that we're responsible for. So my first week on the job, I was given an education on the spider species, which is not far-fetched because we actually are the keepers of an insect collection. So we hold an insect collection for the Cayman Islands, and it's incredible the range of insects that exist in Cayman as part of our collection. We hold a herbarium. We hold a national herbarium, which is again kind of a collection of all of the endemic plant species, etc. So we are responsible for educating the public and engaging the public to understand what's in our own backyard and the importance of us protecting it for ourselves to enjoy, for our visitors to enjoy, and for future generations to also enjoy. And that also leads into our conservation program. So everybody is very familiar with our iconic blue iguanas, and we run that conservation program. That there's been some phenomenal work done there. This year in May, we hosted our first international Blue Iguana Day, and we had people showing love for the blue iguanas all the way from Asia right through to the US and the Caribbean. Because of the phenomenal conservation work that has been done to bring that species back from the brink of extinction. But that's not the only place where we sit for conservation work. We support the Department of Environment with regards to bats and the bats protection. And I know bats got a bad name during COVID, but the Cayman Islands bats, we've got to show those bats some love. And we help with the bat extractions, for example, because they're protected species, but they love roosts, and people get a little panicked about that. We're the people that gets that call to come out and make sure that they're safely extracted from the roofs of people's homes, and hopefully take up their residence in a lovely bat house that is specially constructed, and we sell those to the public. And we also support the Sister Islands Rock Iguana program as well. And there's a lot of work that is being done and still has to be done with regards to the Sister Islands Rock Iguana. And those populations are dropping drastically. And it's important for us to be out there educating the community on how to protect that. So we spend a lot of our time, kind of monitoring sites. We spend a lot of time creating policy and development around Cayman's built heritage and environment. We spend a lot of time engaging our community to participate and be a part of it. We are membership based. If you all are not members of the National Trust, please send me a message at director@nationaltrust.org. org.ky. Laura Butts, my marketing manager, is here as well. Laura is marketing at nationaltrust.org.ky. I can put it in the chat. We would love for you all to be members of the trust. We are membership driven. And what does membership mean? It means you help us to support this mandate and in terms of protection of our environment and built heritage. And our members, for those of you who are in the UK, we are part of a reciprocal program with the International National Trust Organization. So your membership with the Cayman Islands not just supports your home base, but then you have access in the UK to the National Trust properties in the UK, for those of you who have that interest. So it's almost like a double win for you with your membership here. So I fully encourage you all to consider the membership, because then you can use your membership card as part of the reciprocal program. So that also feeds itself into the partnerships that we have. So just like we have the reciprocal program for the International National Trust Organization, we have partnerships with various international kind of veterinarian programs, species programs, conservation programs that we work closely with and share our story. We are also very closely linked to our regional partners as well, because a lot of our regional partners face the same issues that we have when it comes to conservation. And we do spend time kind of talking with each other and finding ways to have our programming overlap. But we're focused today on environment, and that's a huge conversation in the Cayman context, especially in light of development. And for the National Trust, we believe in sustained development. Development must happen, but we believe in sustained development that respects the environment. And the thing about our environment is that we are all interconnected. Everything that happens affects us, whether we understand it or not. And what is playing out for us, particularly in the Caribbean, when it comes to the conversation about mangroves, is that we're seeing the effects of climate change. And Kathy, as our environment manager, can speak a lot about the impact of climate change for small island states like the Cayman Islands. And you know, when you factor in hurricane season and the fact that last week we had Tropical Storm Grace, and we saw such devastation from a tropical storm. It was not even a category 2, 3, or 4. In fact, we are firmly believing that it was a category 1 at least, because of the type of damage we saw. And that speaks to the fact that we have to protect our environment, because that's what protects us. And so we do the Land Protection Fund, and we have a strategy behind that to support, to identify, first of all, the habitats that are important for Cayman, why those habitats are important, and then trying to galvanize our community, whether it's businesses or individuals, to help us collect the funds to purchase. And we do that in collaboration too with the government. We're not trying to be outside of anything. We want a holistic picture, because if you're familiar with the National Conservation Council, you will know that they too identify through the government land that must be protected. So we're not trying to overlap. We're trying to make sure that together we are able to protect a sufficient portion of Cayman's environment. So we encourage people to support the Land Protection Fund. And this year, we're looking at identifying pieces of land that are essential for ancient forests, land that has never been touched ever in our history, and mangroves. And I think Kathy will speak a lot more through the work of Island Offset and the very exciting partnership that we have on carbon offsetting through Island Offset, because make no bones about it, mangroves are essential to the Cayman Islands. And if we don't wake up and do something about it, a lot of us are going to see more devastating results in the years to come, knowing that we cannot avoid climate change. So feel free to reach out to us at any time with any questions that you have. Feel free to get involved in our programming. We're trying to do more to involve our international members. So whether it's joining us through, you know, lectures and series on Zoom, to maybe doing virtual tours for the benefit of our international members. Those are things that we really want to push so that everybody feels like they're a part of home, even if they're not here in Cayman. So I hope that was a good little synopsis of what we do.
That's excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you. A nice little segue into island offsets. So we do have some questions. We're going to move quite quickly on. I'm going to ask this question, and then we'll have some time at the end to have more of a discussion. And it was a question from Samantha about how you create a love and care for insects. You talked about your insect collection, as conservation is often most effective with charismatic animals, ones that as humans we can relate to more easily. So just a little bit on insects. We can talk more about it afterwards, but what would your response to that?
So first of all, I wish you'd meet Lonnie Coots, who is the gentleman who is spearheading our insect collection. I was like you, Samantha, and it kind of sometimes indifferent. Through Lonnie, I now know that there's 3 species of cockroaches, for example, in Cayman, and I'm fascinated by that. Before, if you asked me about a cockroach, well, that would be a different conversation. But it goes back to education and engagement, and we are realizing we have to tell people the beauty of the little tiny dots that we sometimes don't even see that form our insect ecosystem. And I just want to say to you all that perhaps that might be something that we will re-engage Lonnie to do, and give you an opportunity to sit in on it via Zoom, because when he talks about butterflies and we recently did a post on the blue pygmy butterfly in Cayman, I believe, right, Kathy? Which is extremely rare, and it is a gorgeous little butterfly. But guess what? The habitat for it is being threatened. So there's a bigger conversation on development, even for something as unique as that butterfly species that's endemic to Cayman. So we'll try and get some more information out for you all, so y'all can love it as much as we do.
That sounds great. Brilliant, thank you. So we've got a couple of questions about development, actually, now you've mentioned that, but what I might do is park those, because I think it's going to come into a lot of the conversation from the speakers. So we'll have a bit of a conversation about development. That's really fantastic. Thank you, Anik. Catherine, I'd like to pass over to you as the Environmental Programs Manager for the National Trust. With a master's degree in environmental science and a specialization in climate change, you have a particular interest in nature-based solutions. So nature-based solutions to the climate crisis are obviously very important for everybody here. So we're really, really pleased to meet you and looking forward to hearing about island offsets and learning more about that.
Well, thanks so much for inviting us to be on here today. I just want to say real quick that I'm so excited that I didn't run poor Anika off that first week of hers by asking her to go rescue that giant spider. It wasn't meant to be an initiation to the role, but it turned out to be. Thank you so much for being patient with us and still being here. She's doing a terrific job, by the way. But we've worked up this partnership with National Trust and Island Offsets, and I want you, if you guys don't mind, share a few slides that I brought today just to make it a little clearer. I think as I run through exactly what we do. So Island Offsets and the National Trust, it's an exciting partnership that we've developed. And what we're doing is we're using carbon offsets as like an innovative finance tool to be able to fund the purchase and protection of mangroves, because they're so important for the climate. And I want to, hang on, let me see if I can make this slide go to the next one. Here it is. Just talk just a second about what carbon offsets are for those that aren't familiar with them. So you guys all know that all of us have a certain climate footprint that's relative to how much electricity we use in general. So how much we drive, what kind of car we drive, how much we fly, how much electricity we use in our everyday lives. All of those are our carbon footprint. It's the carbon that we're responsible for emitting to the atmosphere through our lifestyles. And the first thing that everybody needs to do is to reduce that as much as you can, right? Get an electric car whenever you can afford to get one, use less electricity whenever possible, ride a bike, all those things that lower your carbon footprint. It's important for us all to do them as much as we can. But the reality is that nobody can listen in the countries that we live in. It's pretty much impossible to bring your carbon footprint to zero. And so for those things you can't reduce, for those carbon emissions you can't get rid of completely, the only way to get your carbon footprint to zero is to offset those emissions by funding a project that either takes that carbon out of the air, the same amount that you've emitted, or keeps it from ever being emitted to the atmosphere in the first place through different projects like renewable energy or supporting forest regeneration or the prevention of deforestation. So all these things, by supporting those projects, you were offsetting or compensating for the emissions that you couldn't reduce in other ways. And so that's what we're doing. And we're doing it through mangrove protection. And I put this slide up here because I think this chart shows very clearly why mangroves are so important to protect for climate reasons. So at the very beginning of this, looking at prevention of deforestation, scientists assumed that the rainforest would be the ecosystem that would require the protection because they have such big trees. Obviously, that's where all the carbon is. Those are the forests you want to protect. And so most of the protocols were written at the beginning for tropical rainforests. And then when they look closer, they said, yeah, okay, well, the forest is huge. Whoops, I made it go too fast. The trees are really, really large. So that's important, as you can see by the green bars here. But there's not a lot of soil in tropical rainforests, whereas the soil in the mangroves that we have here in the Cayman Islands is so deep. It can be 20 feet deep. And that's just chock full of carbon. All of that dark mud underneath mangroves is full of carbon. So the trees might be small. The green bar on our chart here is not as big as it is in the tropical forest, but that soil more than makes up for it. So that's why mangroves are so important in the climate fight and why we need to preserve them. And it's not just the trees, by the way. So what happens when these mangroves are developed, they can't just build whatever they're going to build right on top of that mud because it wouldn't be stable. So to stabilize the soil, they dig it up all the way to bedrock. They mix it with sand, as you can see here in this picture, to stabilize it. And then they build on top. But what happens is that as soon as you expose all of that dark mud to the atmosphere, all of those carbon molecules are oxidized and go up into the atmosphere in one big pulse. It's terrible for the climate. So it's a double whammy with mangroves. Not only do you lose the trees that are daily sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis, but then you have all of that mud that's been there for centuries that's immediately oxidized and goes right back up into the atmosphere. So it's another reason why mangroves are such an important tool for the climate. And so blue carbon refers to mangroves and seagrasses predominantly, and that means that it's blue carbon is a really effective tool to be able to offset the carbon that's going up into the atmosphere and slow down the deforestation of mangroves is important worldwide. So we all know that emission of carbon through power generation and through transportation is the biggest reason why we have all this carbon going in the atmosphere, but deforestation is right behind it. What's happening in Indonesia and all that is right there. What's happening to forests is a big part of what's happening to climate change. So being able to save these mangroves around the world is huge. And of course, it's not just important for climate mitigation, but for adaptation as well. If we have those mangroves here locally, it helps us to adapt to the effects of climate change. It's going to help us to survive these storms that we're going to be hit with. Stronger storms are predicted. It's also going to help with sea level rise. They build soil underneath them slowly. It'll help keep the place cooler. 40% of the rainfall we enjoy in the western side of Grand Cayman comes from the mangroves that are in the center. So all of that rainfall that's generated, we all know how the Amazon does that. It makes its own rainfall. Our mangroves do the same thing. So it's important for so many reasons to help with the effects of climate change as well. So this is now an internationally accepted way to reduce carbon in the atmosphere. They've written new protocols to bring in mangroves into this conversation. It's pretty new, and we're right on board with it. So, and not only do we do this, it's so great for climate, but for all of these other reasons too that are so important for wherever you find the mangroves, Cayman in our case, right? Such important habitat for so many different types of animals that we rely on. Great nursery for many fish species that, and many which are commercially important for fisheries, but also for the diving industry, because a lot of these fish are ones that the divers want to see when they go diving on the reefs. Storm protection, obviously they're famous for that. It holds the soil in place and keeps it from being eroded away, which in turn leads to keeping our water, that beautiful crystal clear water that we're famous for. Also important for tourism and recreation. The rainfall that I mentioned earlier, it builds up land underneath it too over time. And then of course, beauty and inspiration. To be able to have natural areas around is very important for people's mental health, I think, as we've all discovered with these COVID lockdowns. Now, this is a map that's showing you where mangroves are in Grand Cayman. These green areas that you see are areas of mangroves. Now, the ones on the western side of Grand Cayman, unfortunately, have been heavily impacted by development. And I'm just going to show you go through a couple of pictures that were developed by the Department of Environment that show you the change over time. So this is a picture of where the mangroves were in 1976. And as you go through time, you can see they were replaced with areas in red where development has occurred. So this is in 1994, 1999, 2004, 2006, 2008, and 2013. So we've lost more than 70% of the mangroves on this side of Grand Cayman already. And it's just increasing. The places you see in green here that are still left are either not there anymore or under threat. And then here is a map of Grand Cayman. You can see that over here were 7 Mile beaches, and that's why the development has been so intense here. But the rest of the island is still looking pretty good. This part here, if you can see my cursor, this shows you where the central mangrove wetland is. Now this wetland is super special. It's the biggest contiguous area of mangroves in all of the Caribbean, meaning all together in one place. Bigger islands have more acreage overall, but ours is all together like that, and it's almost completely untouched right now. It's starting to be eaten away at the edges, and we need to protect that. It's a very, very special ecosystem, and it's without it, Grand Cayman wouldn't be the Grand Cayman that we know. This is a map that shows you where human development has occurred. You can see it's been pretty heavy on the western side of Grand Cayman, and it's eating away as you go eastward. And here where I showed you where the central mangrove wetland is, the areas with the blue boxes, that's protected areas. You see all of this white that right now is beautiful mangroves that is completely unprotected. And that's why this idea that we have, this initiative with the National Trust and Island Offsets is so important. It's a way to help to protect those areas. So some things that are important to understand about carbon offsets and how they work is there are rules to make sure that these offsets are real and that they're effective. And one of them is that when people offset, that the money that goes into those projects is funding things that would not have happened if it hadn't been for that new funding. So it goes to protect mangroves that would otherwise have been deforested, which unfortunately in Cayman is not difficult to find. It's also important that these projects are permanent. And unfortunately with other forestry projects, we all are seeing around the world that unfortunately forests burn. And what happens when that happens? When obviously trees burn is all that carbon goes up into the atmosphere and it's completely lost. With mangroves, however, most of that carbon is actually in the soil, as you can see in these graphs here. So even if the forest is lost for some reason from a storm or a fire, most of the carbon is in the soil and is still protected and still present. So it's a very safe way to protect carbon, and it's a great type of forestry project. And what happens when people offset their carbon in this way is the money goes directly into the National Trust Land Reserve Fund, which goes straight into land purchase. And it's put aside specifically for mangrove use. And then the land that we purchase with those funds is then protected under legal protection with the Cayman Islands, with the National Trust, so that it is protected in perpetuity. It can never be sold or turned into anything else. So it's a very, very permanent way and a real way to make a real change. So together with the National Trust and with the people and businesses out there that are willing to and interested in offsetting their carbon footprint, we can make a real change in not just the climate, but the Cayman Islands and protecting what is special about our island and make a real difference as far as what happens as far as being prepared for what's going to come as far as climate change is concerned, and also for slowing it down and for protecting our natural areas. So we're very excited about it. We can't wait to see this grow and really start to make a real difference. And I'm just excited about it. So I can't wait to answer anybody's questions if you have any.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Catherine. Wow, it's really great to see that in Cayman, and something that we're all aware of, but not really sure what to do exactly ourselves about. So it's so nice that there's something tangible, something that, a fund that we could get involved in. That's really, really, really fantastic. Thank you. So We have a question about the value of the land and the area of the mangrove forest that's come in from Rita. Is that to do with development, Rita, your question on the value of that land for development purposes?
Yeah, what would it cost to purchase the entire area?
Well, it's something like 8,000 acres. And right now, it depends on where you are, how close the land is to someplace where it would have more value to a developer, like if it's near a road or something, if it's drier versus wetter. So there's a big variation as far as what land costs are. And you know that land has gone up exponentially, the prices here in the Cayman Islands. And now what used to be too expensive to fill no longer is. That's why mangroves are even more in danger than they used to be. Before, if it was mangroves, it'd be like, well, the fill is so expensive, it's not going to make sense to develop that. But now it's past that threshold. And as far as the price per acre, Anik, I've been on vacation for a little while, and I'm actually talking to you today from quarantines, and numbers don't stick in my head. So Anik, do you have any latest figures about how much land costs right now?
I can pull some and give you some samples, Rita. So as we continue, I'll give you some of that later. And just to emphasize Kathy's point, a huge struggle that we have right now in the last couple of years is that the land prices are extraordinary. And what people are demanding, it's incredible. So that's just something to bear in mind when we talk about the challenges that we're actually facing, even in trying to purchase and protect.
Yeah, so true. Thank you. And just on questions, sometimes you think of questions as they come, put them in the chat. If we can't get to them now, we often send the speakers a list of questions after the event, and we'll share those around with who came along as well, if you'd like. So thank you so much for that. I know I'm going to have lots of questions. I'm just looking forward to doing more promotions on that our end and through our membership. And talking of our membership and connecting and all of our priorities to look wider and to share best practices, I'm really excited that James Elsmore has been able to join us today. James is a writer, entrepreneur, and sustainability expert who's lived and worked in the Caribbean, United States, and Colombia. James is the co-founder and CEO of Island Innovation, which is a social enterprise and digital media company which runs the Virtual Islands Summit. So the summit we're going to talk about a little later, it's promoting cross-sector collaboration and the sharing of best practice in sustainable development. Island Innovation originally started as a newsletter collating stories and has developed into a social enterprise running virtual events, working with remote islands around the world and linking them together to encourage sustainable development. I was particularly excited about connecting some of our organizations and entities with you and Island Innovation so that we can see not only what we're each doing in our various locations, but how that compares to and how we can work with others in islands in similar situations all around the world. So thank you so much for joining us, James. Let us know a little bit more about you, Island Innovation, and of course the upcoming summit.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation, and difficult to follow those two presentations. I'll hold my hands up and say I've never been to the Cayman Islands. I apologize. I haven't got there yet. I have got experience in the kind of the wider Caribbean region, but I thought I won't try and pretend. So that's unfortunate, I know. If only we were doing this in person, and let's see when the airport opens, who knows. So the philosophy that we have at Island Innovation is that islands worldwide have certain commonalities that connect them. And clearly that will be obvious to anyone who's traveled around the Caribbean, that there are certain connections between different islands, but also islands that might be very far away. So what does the Caribbean have in common with the Pacific Islands? Or even somewhere that might seem very different, like islands in the Arctic or Northern Europe. There's obviously, as anyone who's lived on an island knows, there's something about that is special. And there are some very obvious examples. So one that might be close to home for some of you is high electricity costs is something that connects all islands around the world. And in the Caribbean, that can be anywhere from 3 to 6 times higher than people would pay in, say, Florida. In the UK, where I'm from, the highest levels of energy poverty are in the Scottish Islands, where it's very expensive to heat your home and there's often an extra cost of electricity. And so again, very different places, but that have this certain connection. It was interesting just to hear the conversation about land prices. And I know that has an impact. I actually saw an article recently in the Cayman Compass about housing access for young people. And that's a conversation that I keep seeing in the Scottish Islands as well. Very, very different, but very, very different places, but again, with these certain commonalities. And we could go on. Obviously, a big one from last year is tourism. We had, right at the start of the pandemic, we hosted an online webinar where we had the Minister of Economy from Greenland and the head of the tourism from the Maldives. So two very different places. And it was fascinating to see how these two very different places were struggling, as I'm sure you all have, with this sudden drop in economic activity due to the lack of tourism. So anyway, Island Innovation, we exist really as an informal network to connect island stakeholders in different parts of the world and help share this information and share stories and share opportunities. And we do that, again, across a wide variety of sectors. So I mentioned generally sustainability, but that can touch many different parts of the economy, from food and agriculture to transport to electricity, and to areas like tourism. We try and bring in all the different interest groups, so NGOs, private sector, government, academia, universities, and make connections between those different groups. And then what's really important, especially for somewhere like the Cayman Islands, is we involve islands regardless of political jurisdiction. So often there are certain forums that are only open to independent states. For example, the COP26 climate conference coming up in November. The UK Overseas Territories have their own forum, their own group that they kind of can communicate with each other. And then islands that are maybe part of a larger state without their own autonomy. So let's say the Florida Keys or Hawaii in its own way, they have another level of jurisdiction. And so although Hawaii might have a lot in common, or Puerto Rico might have a lot in common with Jamaica or Barbados, there are certain limitations to how those can be involved with each other because of these political barriers that are formed. And so we started off actually before the pandemic with the Virtual Island Summit. So it's funny, the first Virtual Island Summit was about 6 months before the pandemic started. And that was because, although I know we're all a bit sick of Zoom in certain ways, we also saw the value of that, the value in being able to have a discussion with someone from Okinawa in Japan, Fiji, Mauritius, and Tobago, all in the same room, for want of a better word, and sharing their experiences. And it's been really amazing over the last 3 or 4 years to see the connections that have come out of that and how that's led to real tangible projects and tangible opportunities for that. So I've just shared, I'm going to plug the conference a little bit. I think I've just, I did share it in the chat, a link to that event that'll be taking place in just under 2 weeks. Really appreciate the opportunity to share that. Would of course love the Cayman Islands to be representative. It's a free event to attend. Last year we did have several speakers from the Cayman Islands. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure who we have this year. And there'll be a wide range of topics that you can join in and just pick ones that might be applicable to you and your own specific interests, and really kind of learn how other places that might be on the other side of the world or closer to home than you think are approaching similar issues and similar problems. And I know Sangeeta, who's going to talk next, will give you her insights as an attendee of that and a member of our ambassador network. We have over 400 ambassadors from around the world on different islands who represent different community interest groups, and act as kind of a connection between this very virtual space that we're organizing to try and connect that on the ground. And it won't happen this year because of COVID, but we're hoping that next year we'll have this global virtual summit that will then be complemented with partner organizations on the ground on different islands around the world, saying, okay, this is the high level global conversation. How do we take these ideas and apply them in the local context to take into account local geography, culture, whatever else is relevant to apply it in that local context. So I'll leave some time for Sangeeta to speak and leave it there.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. Well, I was pleased to be involved in watching the Island Summit last year, so I'm very much looking forward to it this year, and it's nice to be able to share it. Last year I wasn't really sure what it was all about, and now I'm getting there, so it's nice to be able to, for you to be able to tell us directly, and we'll be sharing more about that as well. Seen a few questions come in that I think are going to be probably for the whole panel. So I'd like to use your nice segue to introduce Sangeeta, who's been fabulous over the last year of my working recently with her ideas and involvement, passion and care for the environment, and particularly the Cayman Islands, which I'm always thankful for. So Sangeeta will be talking about island innovation, but also some projects that she's been doing to do with the Green Horizon. So Sangeeta is a marketing and business professional, passionate about climate change initiatives, green finance and sustainability particularly. So Sangeeta, I would like to pass over to you. Tell us a little bit more about yourself, and thank you very much.
Thank you. And yeah, really interesting to hear Anik and Kathy, and I've really enjoyed just listening to those presentations as well. So I've been working with James on island innovation since back in 2019. And as he said, this is before virtual conferences were a thing. I was at the time just about to relocate to the Cayman Islands. And so that's how I got interested in island innovation. And I wanted to sort of move across and do lots of interesting climate related work when I got there. I am back in the UK at the moment, but I've decided that I really want to continue to help from afar. So that's kind of why I'm still representing the Cayman Islands. But this year we actually have some ambassadors on island, and hopefully this will help publicize for future ambassadors to sort of come forward, because as James said, it's great to have people actually on the island who can promote and help to network and sort of bridge, make those relationships. So yeah, I got involved back in 2019 to help James bring finance onto the agenda. So my background is I'm a debt capital markets lawyer, and there's a lot, I hope, I don't want this to be dry or jargon heavy, so I'll throw some terminology out there, but yeah, please feel free to ask what am I talking about. So in 2019 we did bring finance onto the agenda, and we were looking at the Seychelles debt for nature swap, and primarily the idea behind with island innovation is, as James says, to share knowledge and promote what initiatives are being done. I'll talk a little bit about my work with the City of London and Green Horizon in a minute, but finance, as we all know, is a massive driver, and so there are so many projects that need to be realized, but what we really need to do is find the ways to actually fund those. And so a big part of the work I do is trying to highlight the challenges and to sort of showcase what those solutions are and share that knowledge. So yeah, I mean, just to go back to what we were sort of doing in relation to island innovation, I think the ambassador role I found for me has been very much about trying to help promote what's being done on the Cayman Islands. So last year we worked with now Minister Andre Ebanks, and he spoke at a panel on Brexit and how the overseas territories can play a part in the new sort of global Britain. And as I said, I'm hoping in the future there'll be more Cayman Island ambassadors who can really help to promote, because just here listening to the amazing things you're doing, there is so much there where you can really be a leader and helping the other islands in the region to learn from what you're doing and sort of adopt some of those methods. So yeah, I guess I would say the other takeaway, which isn't so much for me, but I think what I've really enjoyed and I've found from talking to other ambassadors is this sense that if you're on a small island, particularly some island states feel very isolated. And so the island innovation community, and we have this amazing WhatsApp group, and there's lots of interesting networking and training virtual sessions. I think it allows people to feel that they're not sort of in it alone. And I'm not saying that I can recognize that being back in the UK, but if you are, in an island in the Pacific, and then you realize, as James was saying, that you have the same concerns and issues as an island across the other side of the world. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic community. I'm always in awe of James. And when I saw he was on the Forbes 30 under 30 and he's achieved all of this before he's even 30, makes me feel very inadequate with what I'm doing. And then really, I suppose, just to talk about my work with Green Horizons. So I work at the City of London Corporation. I've been there since last March, very much working towards COP26, the climate conference being held this year in Glasgow, which the UK is president of. And yeah, I mean, I guess, as I said, it's really about finance. And I know capitalism gets a really bad press, but I feel I get a sense of optimism that it's become such a high priority on, you know, in the minds of business and banking, that we really need to be making finance green. And there's this distinction between greening finance and financing green, and I won't go into the boring detail, but essentially financing green is finding the money, mobilizing money into green projects, and greening finance is creating the framework. So as you can imagine, all the regulatory and other things that need to be done in order to make this all work. So I feel very optimistic that my work, you know, all I hear day in, day out is how people are really striving to make the difference and trying to find ways to get that money to where it needs to be. So yeah, Green Horizon perspectives. Green Horizon is a series of events. We hosted a summit last November, had lots of high profile speakers like Prince Charles. It was not just finance, but it was really about putting finance at the heart of what we need to be doing. And I did actually learn a lot from having watched what James and Island Innovation have done in pulling together this virtual. First time we had to do something very virtual, hybrid virtual, but that was a really interesting experience, and it did really resonate and help, I've been told, to put the focus on finance and what needs to be done. Following on from that, I've been working on something called Green Horizon Perspectives. Next one we have is in September, which will be during Climate Week in New York. And I think one of the things I've spoken to Kate about this is all about trying to create different ways of delivery. And so Perspectives for me, I've called it a magazine style show, but it's about not just having the sort of boring things you normally see at a conference. So we've been focusing a lot on video and other ways of getting that messaging out there. So that's a whole session on storytelling. I could talk about that. But essentially, again, it's about trying to highlight what's happening out there in front of the sort of global financial and professional service community, and again to share that knowledge. So I've tried to sort of speed through, but I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Can I just say, Sangeeta, I really appreciate all that support as well. And it's easy to forget that when we first started doing this, both of us, we had to explain to everyone there's this thing called Zoom, and you download it, and now people have got used to using the mute button and et cetera, et cetera. It's really great. But I think the finance angle, you know, often we do think of it as a bit dry, but we can't talk about environment and conservation unless we actually know how to pay for it. And all the work that you did also inspired us earlier this year to host the Island Finance Forum, which was a slightly smaller spin-off event to exactly address that question, because the finance needs of islands are often quite specific and different to larger countries. So yeah, just wanted to add that in, and thanks again for all the work you've done to support it.
It's been, as I said, it's been a great journey.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you, Sangeeta. That's really, I know with everyone, there's always so much more to say, and with you and the work that we've done and the work that I know that you both do, there's so much more to say, but I really appreciate you pulling it together so succinctly. That's really, really fantastic. And I totally agree. The finance aspect is a massive driver and so important. And I'm so glad that it's getting the attention in relation to into the environment that has been over the last, well, 10 years or so, but certainly in the last 3 or 4, and really seeing it as more of a general understood topic. That it, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful that all finance and anything to do with finance had to be to do with environment? You know, it's like it's fantastic, and I hope that there's going to be more finance conferences as well that are specific to green finance. A couple of questions just on the ambassador program and some things that are coming in. So who can be an ambassador, and how do you get involved? How do you actually become an ambassador, in case anybody here is interested in doing so?
So the ambassador program it's a year-long program, so we ask people to kind of be involved for the whole year, and we will be opening up applications towards the end of this year, probably November, December. for next year. I'll share the link in the chat about that, and there's an application process. Sangeeta was actually our first ambassador, kind of invented the position. That we had 2 or 3 people that first year, and then had over 400 people this year, which has been an amazing experience. And having this group of people from across Africa, Asia, the Pacific, Latin America, Caribbean, bringing together all that experience it's a really, I think, enriching experience for the ambassadors that take part to be able to share with this very diverse community. And we try and make sure that people get a lot of opportunities coming out of that program. So I'll put a link in the chat to where we'll put the application form.
Perfect, great. And the ambassadors are varied in industry within environmental sustainability. Are they all experts in their fields, or they're emerging people who are interested and want to learn more? Is there a criteria?
We ask more for enthusiasm. We've had ranging from 16, 17-year-old high school students to heads of government departments and CEOs of companies. So it's a real range of people, but we just ask for some kind of, evidence that they have something going on already, and kind of can demonstrate that if they take part in the program, we'll be able to keep going with that.
Amazing.
I was just going to say that what's really lovely is that you do have this community of people who are students, professionals from all walks of life. And I just think all of us, there's no sort of, it's so diverse and there's no sort of distinction in that way. So you're all united by this kind of common purpose, and it becomes like a global family. But I think I've really enjoyed that. And I think that's one of the things that has been just really, and I think you started with the fact that it's grown and you have so many applications now, just as testimony to how people really like being an ambassador.
Brilliant. And the networking, obviously, and the people you can meet. I mean, I wondered, with the spirit of this particular mini event being like what you're trying to do, and that is connectivity. I mean, would there be, for example, organizations in other islands that are doing similar projects with offsets, that our island offsets organization might connect with, and that you might be able to put them in touch with? There might be some benefits there. I don't know, Catherine, whether you have obviously are well connected in the area and might know other entities that are doing a similar thing. You can compare stories and various stages of the process, I guess.
Yeah, there aren't many, actually, to answer your question. There's I've seen some projects being developed in Mexico and Belize, but there actually isn't very much going on. There's something going on in Africa, but this is really brand new, and that's why it's so exciting. And I would love to be able to assist other islands, because our ecology is very much the same. I mean, even though politically and geographically and socially we might be very, very different, ecologically, we're very similar in many ways. And I think that what we learn here in the Cayman Islands, we could take to other places and help them to be able to save their special ecosystems locally, and to protect it at a local level. I think that's what's so genius about this, is that we're fighting on a local level that's going to have a global impact. So it's to do the think globally and act locally thing. It's for real happening here. And I think it's a great program. It's a great idea that could be taken all over the world. And I'd love to work with James more, actually, to see that happen.
Great. That's what it's all about, right?
Absolutely. And I'll just say, like, I don't have, I wish I did, but I don't have a full memory of all the different projects happening everywhere. And that's the great thing about having access to this community, being able to fire off a question, say, who knows about other projects? And it reminded me, actually, my favorite experiences have been when people have joined this global network and met people doing very similar things on the same island. And it's surprising how often that happens. I mean, even in relatively small islands, making connections locally with people that they didn't know before. I found that was a surprising outcome sometimes. But yeah, Catherine, you can have a look.
Yeah. Brilliant. I love it. Yeah. Meeting someone from down the road by going through a global network, it's brilliant. Great. So we have a couple of questions that have come through. We've got 5 or so minutes left. What we usually just do, so as I would usually go to the top of the hour, and we might cut the recording, but if anyone does want to stay on and have further chats and discussions, they're very welcome to. So I'll just mention some of these, a lot of these questions coming in about development and the feeling of as a general population, as the man on the ground who doesn't have a large control, how can we help and what can we do? So I think one of the questions is can anything be achieved without major political commitment? 20 years ago, solar panel units were actually illegal in Cayman. Surely Cayman could easily become self-sufficient in solar and wind power. The islands are so small, electronic cars transport are entirely feasible, and why not phase out petrol cars? More about planning and the hope that the politicians will get behind that. Various other questions about development in various areas. So any
but don't forget Little Cayman and that dreadful development. This is really, I just feel so frustrated and angry about things like that. I'll mute myself again now.
No, Jane, please do it. We need your frustration. We need your passion. And the more that we have of that, the more that we give a voice to that. So the Little Cayman overwater development, how does this come about? How does this happen? And what can we do? It's the questions that come up, and just connecting it to the other question that we had about how we can prevent development, in those ways. I don't know whether the National Trust can.
Well, I was just going to say very quickly, so for Jane, for example, with the overwater bungalows, there was a petition that was actually launched by our Little Cayman National Trust Committee members. And what was beautiful about that petition is it gave voice to concerns from people on all 3 islands. So we saw people signing that petition from all 3 islands. And that's a classic example of just something that we can do to say, hey, enough is enough, and we're not in agreement with this because it is in a marine reserve, and that's what is a huge concern for us. So, for the Coastal Works application, and we those things we still give voice to, and the petition is an example of that. We're hopeful because we have a premier who came, you've got that new Ministry of Climate Change, sustainability, all of that under his portfolio. And we are hoping that that lends itself to government's will to push some more on protection for the environment, and that type of programming, whether it's financial support, whether it's support through policy and law. We are hopeful about that because it seems right now that that's what's being indicated. So we're hoping that it continues that way. But I want to say to everybody, the National Trust, we stand as an advocacy voice. So of course, we try as much as possible to share concerns and voice the concerns of our membership.
Could I just add to that, Anit? Thank you so much. And Jane, I share your disgust, I'll call it. You can change the word if you'd like.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I took the letter that was distributed on social media and I sent it in. And I immediately received a response saying that letter pretty much was only good, would be considered for work permit applications for the site, not for the site itself. Mm. So in other words, even in pursuing it and trying to support this movement, there's still backlash from within. And I was asked to then write separately to another email address because that letter really only addressed the work permits, not the actual planning department. So I don't know if everyone here has turned it in or not, but okay. I have the letter here from one of the senior policy advisors. So, it's about the follow through also, I think on everyone's end, all of us can send in a letter, but if there's red tape or if there's stuff blocking you from within, people get frustrated also because they immediately sense that what I'm doing isn't going to make a difference. Mm-hmm. You immediately get that. And that's the situation with Cayman more often than not. And so the question that I had in the chat there earlier, there's another question from a member who who sent this in, and I wanted to bring that up also, but I am conscious of your time, was what do we do as just call it man and woman on the street when we're faced with situations like this, or a particular piece of land, you find out much too late that it's already been approved for development? How do we actually have a say when we're constantly facing this? What else can be done? What kind of lobbying? What is a practical approach to really preserving, how many acres you said, is it 8,000 acres? What is a truly practical approach that can involve the entire country, the entire region, the entire world, so that we're not waiting for 10 years to raise $160 million to purchase it? I mean, I feel like it's a now thing versus waiting. Island offsets, I think it's a brilliant idea, but it's going to be too late by the time, unless it's bringing in tons and tons of money instantaneously. I think that what could we do collectively, whether it's Island Innovation getting, also Green Horizon perspectives, what could people do collectively to just expedite this process of raising the funds to save the land for my child and hopefully my grandchildren and all of that? And what do we do then to push against letters like this that say, thanks so much for your letter, but by the way, you still need to write another letter? What is the practical solution, would you say?
I'll just say a couple of things quickly. One, again, we've seen community work in such a way when they had the issue with the port a couple of years ago, and we saw the outcome of that where again, it was pushed through local grassroots entities and built on that. And then the National Trust came in, and it was a whole legal question. That is as much as we can do and give voice to these things. And Cayman is a small community. We have access to our leaders of government and our politicians, and it's to keep applying the pressure. And so that they understand that we just don't find this acceptable. We have to give voice to it. The second thing is, you're right, funding is a huge question. And one of the other areas is the support of grants and funding through other entities or partnerships. And one of the things I'll flag for Cayman that I have noted as an overseas territory is that sometimes we get overlooked for having access to some of these channels that can get us funding. One is a concept of Cayman as being a very rich place. So we've got money here. So it becomes this huge struggle. But even when they look at us in alignment with other territories. And then secondly, we still finding it difficult to tap into the funding that could be available for overseas territories, even through the UK and some of those institutions. So that is something that we know we've got to do some work on, because if we could have access to some of these grants, et cetera, some of these funding opportunities, that would also help move the needle.
Absolutely, understood. May I ask the question for the member here, Kate? The concept of sustainable development, they wanted to know what that means for each of you, because any sort of development, damages the environment in some way. What does sustainable development look like for each of you? Maybe we don't have time to answer that fully, but
I think we do. I think it's just to say that, if anyone does need to leave, we understand. But I think if we want to go through and ask each in the same order they spoke, then I'm happy with that. Nick, do you have any big questions?
Well, I'll keep it short by just using an example that worked for us recently, and kudos to Kathy and our Environmental Advisory Committee Chair, Mr. Peter Davey, who sat in a planning meeting where there was an application for something that would have impacted ancient forest, and they had a conversation and brought the developer to the table. And I think this is one of the biggest success stories that we really need to build on, because the developer then worked with the trust so that we could then acquire a portion of that for protection. And they pushed their development in such a way that they could still do what they needed to do, but they made sure that an area was then allocated for protection. There are a lot of little things that developers can do to work with entities like ourselves, et cetera, to protect and create what we consider elements of sustainable development.
I think particularly economics is always a major issue. and obviously the tourist industry. And there's a big debate going on about who generates, and cruise ships and residents and all sorts of things like that. But what has always astounded me over the years is you have a jewel in Little Cayman. This is just one example. And you would actually make more money by keeping it as a jewel, a pristine eco jewel, and making a few people pay through the nose to land on that grass landing strip and enjoy that environment and look at the boobies, rather than all the other sort of rubbish developmental ideas. I just wish we could get people's heads around that you're throwing away. And all I hear and all I see is building, 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 particularly at the moment. It seems to be the only thing that's happening somehow. And it's heartbreaking. Sorry, I'm ranting again.
I'm with you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And actually, Botswana did exactly that. So you can look them up as a good case study. They completely changed their tourism model to one of high-end, low impact tourism, and they're making way more money than they were before. So that's a very great idea.
But somebody needs to persuade the politicians and the developers and the people in the tourism industry of this. It's I know there are case studies of it, but why can't we do it in Cayman?
Anik is perfectly poised, having worked at the Department of Tourism. So I have faith in Anik. We have to change people's mind. We have to shift them. We do not want to become Dubai.
Exactly. And to follow on from what Anik said, I think that was a great example, Anik, that you brought up, because we went around, well, we went to through the government channels, but then we went beyond that and we spoke to the developers specifically, independently, because I find that people don't think that what they're doing is really the problem. I'm just going to do this little tiny development. It's not going to have a big impact on the whole island. So it's just a little thing. But combined, all our little things, make a big difference. If we can talk to people more, I think, in our own lives, and say, if you could just do this little thing differently, put it over here instead of there, it would make a big difference. And I think people are willing to make small changes like that. And to the question about sustainability, of course, sustainability, the definition is to be able to get what we need today without affecting the resources for the people of tomorrow. And I think that is what we need to keep in mind every time that we are thinking about a change, a new development, a new road, anything like that. Is it going to significantly affect our homeland for our children? Are they going to have the same things that we grew up with, that we cherish in their lives as well?
I think so. And I think definitely that point about, offsetting in a different way, in a sense. I mean, if you think about some developmental programs, if you think about, for example, quotas that you have to have in the UK for, not from an environmental point of view, but from an affordable housing point of view, you're going to have in a development, you have to have a certain quota that is affordable housing. And that's not in the financial interest of the developer, but it's law. It would be nice to know that in any development, there had to be a ratio, like you buy this amount of that mangrove per ratio of whatever it is you're building, something like that, and I think that's got to be ways like that. And Rita's point about convincing government to require developers to sit in on some of the environmental awareness sessions with the National Trust and other entities, love it. Love it. And again, looking at case studies, yes, all good and well, but I totally hear Jane's point. We can do the academic stuff and look at the case studies for as long as we like, but unless we put it into practice and we actually do something about it, it just gets more and more frustrating. So I hopefully these conversations can continue.
Sorry, and if I could, Jane said something, and I think that's the other part of the conversation we have to get better at, and that's the economics of it. I think we need to get a little better at talking about the economics of why the protection is important. People get a great, they get a hoorah about the economics of the development, but they don't understand the economics that's tied to the protection of these places. And I think that's where one area that we recognize we may have to get a little better at. We just need to start showing dollar figures attached to some of these things. And that's difficult, but I think sometimes that's the only thing that some people hear, unfortunately.
And I was just going to say that something that we played at one of our last Green Horizon Perspectives is putting a value actually on the carbon sequestration and the forest services elephants. So elephants obviously are being killed and they're nearing extinction, but as you say, people they should care because they want to save the elephants, but actually they've put a monetary value on how much value each elephant brings to the carbon offsetting and pulling out carbon from the atmosphere. All of a sudden you're looking at millions, this one elephant. And I think we shouldn't have to do that. But when people realize the value, and as you say, with the mangroves, if there's a way of valuing it, is saying, well, this is the actual economic impact and what they're going to, because if we don't pull that in, or the effects of climate change and how much that's going to cost to remedy. And I think you're right. And it's sorry, I found that quite interesting because I hadn't actually realized, because I just think people should save elephants because elephants are amazing. And then I realized, well, actually, no, maybe you need to put a number on it for people to make the change.
James, did you have anything to add about sustainable development in that context that Rita was asking?
Nothing specific. I think not knowing so much about this specific situation, I wouldn't like to too much, but just to echo the points that were made before about the funding situation that came up a little bit earlier. That's something that we do hear a lot from other places that are territories or similar words, kind of falling between the gaps and finding it really hard to access money for these kind of projects.
Fantastic. We are coming to the close of the evening, and I know that people do have places to go. I know Rita as well, we can talk about this a lot, and we do. And I did note the point about how we can do something without getting so anxious and upset and depressed about it all. And I can see that happens, and often in conversations that we have, that happens, and it's important to be angry and it's important to be upset, but I think it is also good to try and see what we can do and hold on to that as positives as well. And every time we do have a positive result, we celebrate that and we just do more next time. And you know, personally, for me, what I'd like to see out of even an event like today is obviously we're having the conversation, obviously we're sharing our experiences and our frustrations, but also connecting with people that have new ideas about how we can do something. Rita, you've helped us understand a little bit about some of the admin sides of things, and perhaps we can then look at that and connecting more globally, but also locally as to what we can do. I would just put it to everyone here to say, you know, is there anything, you know, if there was one thing that you'd like to either come out of this meeting or generally, you know, what would it be? Either share it with me here or in the chat.
I mean, I think all I would say is that, and I'm not an activist by any means, but I think it's just about each of us having a bit of a responsibility. And really quick anecdote, very close to where I'm living, they're going to be cutting down some trees and to make a development. And it was very out of my kind of comfort zone to be writing a letter to sort of say, you shouldn't do this. But what I noticed is there was a community effort, and we all wrote individual letters to the planning council to say, they don't need to cut down these mature trees, they can build around them. And I think the same thing applies, as you were saying previously, with the port. It is about communities getting together and not feeling helpless, but actually doing what we can do. Because sometimes people just think, oh, it's the easiest thing, cut down that tree. There are ways now to work around the natural environment. And so I think I would just say, maybe sometimes it is about all of us coming outside of our comfort zone, because I've never written a letter to my council before, and it did feel quite empowering afterwards. I'm still waiting, fingers crossed, that they're not going to allow those trees to be cut down.
We want a picture of you hugging them.
I did think of
No, I will not allow this.
And
I mean, what are they going to move the whole, have a party by the trees, you know, if they don't approve it. So we're going to picnic at the trees today. We just won't allow them to come in and cut them down.
I think the more we write these letters, the more we have these conversations, the less it becomes a big deal. You know, you said, oh, I've never written. Well, once you've written 4 or 5 and you just keep on going, then it becomes that this is what we do. We're not giving up on that. So that's amazing. So,
and I'd like to thank Anique and Catherine and James and everybody who's contributed presentations. That's really been very inspiring and encouraging, and I'm sorry about the rant.
Absolutely, absolutely celebrate and ditto that, Jane. No apology necessary. That is what we want. That is what we're here for. And I definitely don't apologize for that. That's important. We need the passion. Without the passion, you know, we won't stop things. We won't make a difference. So never apologize for that. And thank you so much, Annie, Catherine, Sangeeta, and James. Really appreciate you coming, and lots to think about. I really do hope everybody can get involved in the Island Summit. Have a look at it, see which areas you want to get involved in. And if you want an even closer involvement, we can put you onto James, and people have left their contacts in the chat. We'll share those around. I'm looking forward to learning more about Thrive Cayman as well, actually. So I'm just seeing things come up, and it's all really exciting. So thank you so much for everything, and keep in touch with what we're doing. We've got a number of events. We have an event every Wednesday. This quarter has obviously been sustainability and development, and we move into various other themes, but stay in touch, and thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you for having us, and thanks
everyone.
everybody. Good seeing you all.
Thank you.
Bye.